We'll wait for more people to join. So we always have questions that are submitted with signups, and I'll probably start answering some of those questions first as people filter in. Yeah. One of the questions was if there'll ever be a standalone Grist local install version, like an app, that would sync with the hosted cloud service. One can only dream. Future roadmap idea, but probably not in the short term. We do talk about it. There is an Electron.js app that somebody put on GitHub. You can find it in our forum. That works. People use it. But that's a contributor. One of the nice things about Grist being open source is people do cool stuff with it. There was also a lot of questions about just getting started in Grist. So what we're going to cover in today's webinar is about access rules and access rules for teams. We're going to start with some of the basics of access rules, but we're very quickly going to get into pretty fancy access rules. So I want to take a step back since there were so many questions just about how do I get started with Grist? What are the resources that I should use first? With a quick walkthrough of our lightweight CRM, because I think that explains a lot about how Grist works, and then I'll point you to some resources. So I'll go ahead and share my screen. So this is for everyone who's just, where do I start? So I like to show people the lightweight CRM because it's sort of the minimum that you can build in Grist. So what I mean by that is the way that this works is if I click on a contact on the left, you'll see that on the right, there is a, can you see my screen, by the way? You can answer in chat. You should be able to. So on the right, there's a contacts card that is updating, and then any interactions related to that contact are updating on the bottom. And in order to understand what's happening here, it's helpful to look under Tools, Raw Data. So if we look at raw data, we can see that there's two tables. There's a table of contacts and a table of interactions. If you're used to spreadsheets, this would be like Sheets in Excel or Google Sheets. So they're different tables and different sheets. And if you open one of these, it opens so that you can see what all of the actual columns are before you're hiding anything or creating any views or linking any widgets. Same with interactions. So I like to think of Grist as you start with your spreadsheet data, you make some relations between them using reference columns, which we'll do in a second, and then you can build this app-like interface that makes things easier for just visualizing data, managing data, and even data entry. So I have a copy of the lightweight CRM that is just these two tables that we just saw in raw data before we've done anything to them. So we have contacts that has contact information in different columns, and then we have interactions. And each one of these interactions should be related to a particular contact. A contact could have more than one interaction. So these rows are all for the Sporer group. So let's pretend I just imported this from Excel. I can open the creator panel on the right by clicking this icon. And the creator panel has two main tabs. One is table, which lets you configure things about this table. For example, maybe you want zebra stripes, makes it easier to see something. A quick and dirty way to hide columns, unhide columns. You could also do it by right-clicking and going to hide columns. There's also a keyboard shortcut. So there's things for the table, sort and filters here. You can also do it at the widget level. But in column is where you set for a particular column its type. Is it text? Is it numeric? A date? Here we want to relate each record to a contact. So what we want is a reference column. So a reference column is a one-to-one relationship between this record and a record in another table. A reference list, you can relate multiple things. So we want a reference because each one of these belongs to one contact. Grist is already making a guess as to these relationships based on text. It's seeing in the contacts table in the company column that text is matching, so it's setting this up. But if I had multiple tables, this dropdown would have multiple tables. I can set the correct thing. It just changed to row ID, but it doesn't really, I'm going to go back to company. So I'm matching on company. That's the text that matches. Sal has a question if access rules are only available for teams. Is there an email type, for example? We're going to get into user attributes using email and access rules. That's part of this. Let me just finish this answering questions thing. So this was just a question on where to start. So here we have a reference. So now we can go back to this page and we can add a widget to this page. So that's going to make another window. So I can choose what type. Is it a table, a card, a chart? We want a table. We want a table of interactions. And you can see that this select by appears. It's because Grist knows, because of that relation that we just made, which interactions records relate to which record over in the contacts table. So when I click on these, it updates. And then you can also link a table to itself. So what I mean by that is I can add another widget, which is contacts again, this time as a card, just so that I don't have to keep scrolling in columns related to contacts. And then that updates based on my selection. And all of these are drag and drop. On the top left, you can drag and drop and move things around. And now this looks a lot like the lightweight CRM we started with. And I can go ahead and hide things. I'm doing a quick hide over here just to declutter things. Maybe I want to hide attachments as well. So when I click on this, it shows everything that's related. So that's what I mean by you start with data, you relate things, and then you start building your dashboards. And all of this was without writing any code, which is really helpful. Okay, so I think we have enough people to get started with the actual access rules. So we did an access rules webinar last year. I believe it was last March. And that one started from the most basics and it built in complexity. And to answer Sal's question of, is it only available for teams? You could add access rules to publicly shared documents, which is covered in that webinar. This one, we're going to focus on team use. So we're going to start with the basics, and then we're really going to focus on user attributes, including email, when writing access rules. We're going to be working in two different documents. One of them is payroll, where we have team members' payment information. And another one is a task management document, where each week there's different tasks. And we're tracking this every single week. This might look familiar if you attended last month's webinar. Last month, we focused on how do you take a template from our gallery and modify it like an expert. So it's all the ways to investigate what's under the hood and make modifications. So we had modified the task management to this if you want to go back and watch that webinar. Okay, we're going to start in payroll. So in payroll, what we have is a table of payroll, the date, the person, what their role is, how many hours, their per hour rate, how much they were paid. For HR or whoever's managing this, there is a summary dashboard where you can see in each pay period what was paid out, the breakdown by role, and the individual people, and those update when you click. Then we have a table of people, and you can see their rates, if they've gotten promotions over time and things like that. And then there's just a big table of rates as well. So one of the things that we might want to do with access rules is we might want to hide this summary from people who shouldn't see it. So anyone except the owner of this document, as well as rates. And maybe we want the people table to be visible, but we want to hide particular columns like address and zip, because that's a bit sensitive. But we would like to keep phone number and email because maybe we want to use this as a company directory. So let's go ahead and start writing some access rules. So we go under tools to the access rules page, and let's look at these default rules. So all documents start with these default rules, which is saying editors and owners have full permission. And we'll get into what these letters mean. Viewers can only read. If you hover on each of these, it says what it is, but I'll break it down a little bit further. Viewers can only read this, and everyone else. So that means somebody who came here who hasn't been added to the document as an owner, editor, or viewer. So they're anonymous. It's not publicly shared. They don't have a role. They can't see anything. They're blocked. So going through the permissions, R is read. So can they read the data? U is update. Can they update data that's already there? C is create. So can they create a new record or row? I use record or row interchangeably. D is delete. Can they delete data? And then S is schema. So schema in particular is very powerful because schema lets you do things like create new tables and columns, create new widgets, link widgets, create new pages and views. But it also lets you edit formulas and write formulas. And the reason that's so powerful is because even if I'm restricted from viewing particular data, if I have schema permission, I can edit. I can use a formula to find any data I want if I'm proficient with formulas. So formulas always have access to all data. So it might be a good idea to limit schema edits if you have sensitive data and you don't want people using formulas to find things. So how can you add to the default rules? You can add a plus sign here and enter a new rule. So maybe what I want to do is stop editors from being able to have schema permissions. I don't want them to be able to change my structure, my views, or write formulas. So I can start typing user dot, and you see there's an autocomplete. So these are the user attributes that Grist already knows about the person who is logged in. So Grist knows if they're an owner or an editor based on when you added them, what permission you gave them. It knows their email that they're currently logged in with. It knows their user ID, their name, some other things. So with user access, what we want is if the user is an editor, we want to block their ability to edit structure, views, and formulas. So you might say, okay, but here it's still giving it to them, and these you can't edit. Access rules apply in a particular order. Once this condition is met, that's the condition that applies. So if they're an editor, they can't, they are denied schema permissions. And then the next thing doesn't matter because that was already met. So the order of the rules matters. The other thing you might have noticed is that in these rules, it has in, and then there's a list in brackets. So with that's what you do with lists. So if you see the user access is in this list, that's the syntax, or you can just do a comparison. So a double equal sign is how you do a comparison in Python. So in access rules are written in simplified Python. In our support page, it tells you the basic conditions. But if you want to compare, if you want to say, are they an editor, then you use the double equal sign. Because in Python, a single equal sign is how you define something, like how you define a variable, which you can't really do in access rules. And then the last thing that I wanted to show you is we recently added this checkbox here. And what this does, it's when you're adding new table rules, not default rules, but rules specific to a table, it's really common to want to say that that an owner can do everything. And then it gets repetitive to write that over and over. So we added this recently so that when you add a new table rule, it's automatically in there. You can delete table rules from this, similar to deleting a widget. And you can also edit this. So let's say I wanted to make it so that editors can do everything except delete. And I wanted to add a memo. We'll go into memos later in this webinar as well. When I add a table rule, you can see all of that comes with it. So this is like your seed. This is where you say every single time I add a table, these are the rules that I need over and over. Most commonly, it's going to be the default, which is this. If the user access is an owner, give them full permissions. So I'm going to go ahead and save that. Yep, Sal, to answer your question, we're going to get there. Yes. Okay, so we're going through default rules, seed rules. Now let's start learning how to hide tables. So we said we wanted to hide all of the summary tables on this page, and we want to hide rates. So let's go back to access rules. And it's very simple to hide a table from particular people. So you can tell what a summary table is because it has in brackets what is being summarized. So the owner should have access, everyone else, deny all. They shouldn't be able to read it, update, they shouldn't be able to do anything. And I'm just going to repeat that for the other ones. We're working on an update now to basically make this easier. Oh, we want deny all. To basically make that easier or quicker to do. Okay, but it's the same thing. These would be the rules. So let's save that and let's see what this looks like if we were an editor. So under view as, even before adding anyone to this document, I can view as any of these example users. They're like dummies. So just a generic editor or a generic viewer. So what should be disappearing is pay periods and rates. And we're going to notice something interesting and I'm going to explain it. So let's view it as an editor. So they can't see pay periods and they can't see rates, but people also disappeared, which is weird. We want them to be able to see people. And I'm going to explain why that's happening. And this is something you might want to keep in mind when working with access rules. In the people table, there is a widget that is showing rates. If somebody does not have access to view a particular widget, like you hid the entire table, the entire page disappears. So that's something to keep in mind. It's also maybe a easy way to hide a whole page if you want as well. You could just stick a widget in there and it's gone. But so that's what's happening. So what I would do in this case is I would duplicate this page and I'm going to call my duplicate rates. I'm going to make this my new rates table. And I don't necessarily need this view. I'm just removing a view. It's not deleting the table, just the view. And then this one that's people, I'm going to get rid of this widget that editors can't see. So now I have one that editors should be able to see, every single widget that's in there, and then one that's just for me. So now if I go to access rules and I view as an editor, there's payroll and there's people, because that widget no longer is making that whole page disappear. Okay, so that's hiding tables. We also said that in the people table, we wanted to hide particular columns like address and zip. So in access rules, we can add a rule to the people table. In this 3-dot menu above the widget is where you can add column rules. And then you select the columns that you want to apply rules to, such as address and zip. And you can see that this granting owner permission, that's still happening because of this checkbox that we did down here. So it's just saving us that little bit of time. So everyone else, deny it. So let's go ahead and save that. And let's view that as an editor again. So if we come over to people, you can see that address and zip code is gone. All the other columns are there, and it disappears from all views. You also don't see it in this people card because your access rules are not about the view, it's about the structure. So if we go to raw data, which is where you can see what your tables are, you can see that they can't see the tables for the summary tables or the rates because the structure is preventing them from seeing those tables from any view. And if they were to open people here, they still can't see those columns that we just restricted. Okay. So we've done default rules, seed rules, that's that checkbox, hiding tables, hiding columns. Let's move on to row level access rules. Let's go over to the task management template. We're going to actually come back. The grand finale is row level access rules with reference columns. We're going to call it the grand finale. That's when things get very fancy. But let's do row level access rules based on a value in a cell. So in this task management document, every week there's tasks. When a task is done, you click the checkbox. We have some conditional formatting. So if a row belongs to a project that's a priority, there's a project page where certain things are priorities. Those tasks are yellow. Unless they're completed, then they're green. Everything done goes green. We can look at things by week. We can look at things by people. There's a backlog person, so we can also filter by backlog, see what's in the backlog, hasn't been assigned, we need to get to it. And we can also look at things by department. We can make some more room here. Okay, so maybe what we want, it's when a row is done, we lock it. It becomes read-only. Nobody should be able to edit it. You can read it, but you can't edit it. So this is going to be a row level access rule. So it depends on the value in this column. So the value in this done column, if it's true for that row, then this rule applies to the entire row. So let's go to access rules. I'm going to do this so I don't have to keep writing the owner thing. I'm going to add rules to tasks because that's where the done column is. And it's very simple. What we're saying is in this record or row, in the done column, when it's true, and you can see the autocomplete's helping, then it should be read only. And let's just go ahead and save that. Oh, let's add a memo. We'll just say check with Casey. She's the boss. Okay. So we can see memos and actions. So what a memo does is when a rule is preventing someone from making a change, you can add a custom message. So it's communication with you and your team. So let's view this as an editor. So if you view it as an editor, this one's done. They shouldn't be able to edit it unless they made a typo. There you go. Check with Casey and the memo appears. But when that is not done, they should be able to edit. So that's what row level access rules are. And if you said deny all, they can't even read it. The row just disappears, which we'll do in a second. So let's now start using user attributes. So with user attributes, like I said in the beginning, there's certain things Grist knows, like the person logged in, their email. We've been using so far access. Grist knows the access, but what about the particular emails? So let's say in tasks, what we want to do is we want to restrict BizDev tasks. If the department equals BizDev, then only Casey and Hans, those are our managers in this fake company, only Casey and Hans should be able to see BizDev. I'm going to show you two ways to do it. One way is not recommended, but it's going to help you understand a little bit better the way that is recommended. So I'm going to show you two ways to do this. So the way that I don't recommend, so if you're scratching your head going, this doesn't seem scalable, you're right, but I just want to explain how things work. So I'm just going to add the rule and then walk you through it. I'm just going to copy and paste it to prevent typos. Sal was asking, where did you specify that rules are for editors? That's a good question. I didn't necessarily, this is actually, So remember, rules are going in order. So you kind of need to see it in order with default rules. So here we're saying an owner can do everything regardless of what comes after. So regardless of whether or not a task is done. Now, for everyone who is not an owner, if the task is done, it becomes read-only for everyone except owners, because we already said owners can do anything they want. Now, if a task is done, it becomes read-only. And then all the other rules apply for all other cases. So in the case where it is not done, editors should still have their default permissions. That's why they can still edit. So that's why the order, I could specify it again here if I wanted to. And it would behave the same basically, but that's why the order matters. So basically it's, oh, if you just click plus, it does everyone else unless you start typing. So that's why. So what's left over is, because it's a Boolean column, it's just true or false. What's left over is false. So in that case, these rules apply, the default rules. Okay. So I'm writing the rule now with emails. So what I'm saying in, I'm going to add a new rule. I'm going to explain what's happening here. And it's, I want to make this do wrap text. That'll up soon. Okay. So what we're saying is, if your email is either Casey's email, if what you are logging in with, your user email is Casey's email or Hans's email, and the department for the task is BizDev, then you should be able to do everything. Then the next thing down would be, if the department is BizDev, and you're not those people basically, so remember it goes in order. Now, if you're not going to be those people, that hasn't been met, you can't see it. Otherwise, in all other cases, allow all. So this is one of the tricky things about access rules. It kind of has to make you think a little bit like a developer and think about the way that rules are being met. So we're saying if you're an owner, you can do whatever you want. If something is done, it's read only for non-owners. Now for Casey or Hans, if that's their login email, they can see BizDev. Otherwise, people can't see BizDev. But all other department tasks like UI, UX, people, all the other things, that's fine. So let's save this. And I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to add Hans to my document because Casey's the owner. Ooh, I'm trying to just add Hans. I don't want to do a typo, which is why I want to copy and paste it. I want to add Hans to my document so you can see how this works. So if I share this with Hans, I'm going to make him an editor. So if we view this, now that I've actually added Hans, people who've actually been added are listed above the dummy users. So I go over to Hans, and Hans can see BizDev because he meets that condition. But an editor who does not meet that condition, who is not Hans, cannot see BizDev. They're not seeing any BizDev tasks. That's what those rules did. You have to think about the logic. So while this works, it's not really scalable because it means every time you have a new manager, you need to enter their emails manually into a rule. This doesn't work very well. There's a better way to do this. And the better way to do that is by creating custom user attributes. So in the way that we have here, user.email, user.access, you could have user.anything, you name it, user.role, user.management, whatever it is. And in order to do that, you need to use an existing user attribute and map it to your custom one. So what I mean by that is you need a table where you have all of the emails where the custom user attribute is looking it up in your table in your document, matching on some attribute such as email. We're about to do that. And now it knows enough about your document to start doing fancy things with rules. So I'm going to go into raw data because I already set this up in people. I already have a people table that has emails, and I have a checkbox that says whether or not they're management. So what I can do now is I can make a custom user attribute that says when someone logs in, find them in this table, find their row, and now we know more stuff about them based on other columns or based on records that point to this one. That's the grand finale. That's the reference columns and user attributes. Okay, so let's make a user attribute. It's easier to see it once it's in action. So let's add a user attribute. The very first thing is the name. What are we going to call this? When you start typing user dot, and it starts autofilling your attribute options, what's the name? So I'm going to just go with role. It could be whatever you want. What is the existing attribute we're going to use to do this mapping? It has to be in the table somewhere in this document. So let's go ahead and use email. Email is what I recommend because it's not likely to change. People can change their names in their profile settings and things like that. So where are we storing this email in our document? It's in the people table. In which column? It's in the email column. So we've created this new user attribute. And now we can change this rule that we already created the bad way. We can change it to use this user attribute. So what I can say is I'm just going to modify this. Everything that was in the parentheses, I'm going to simplify this. And I'm going to say user dot role, which is the new custom attribute that I just created up here. It's looking in that table. You can see it's showing the columns in that table: name, management, email. ID is, we'll talk about that in a second in the grand finale. So we're saying what we care about is whether or not they're management. If they're management, if that is true, then this rule applies to them. So we're saying in the people table, management, if it's true, then the rule applies. So let's go back and let's start viewing this as people. Actually, let's go ahead and give someone a promotion. Let's give Luke a promotion. Luke's promoted. Congrats to Luke. So I'm going to view as, I still have Hans as a real person. And you'll notice now that my dummies, which were like owner, editor 1, editor 2, now have names. This is because once you create a user attribute table and you're pointing at a table, it starts to use that information. It's just a helpful thing to view things as before you add people. So if I go ahead and I view this now as Luke, who just got the promotion, he should be able to see biz dev. So there's biz dev. But if I look at this as Hannah, she cannot. So now, as the team grows, as I add new people, I don't need to change the access rule. I set logic. I put in a rule that it knows what to do now as the people table grows. I can add people, I can promote people, I can demote people. It happens. It's painful. It doesn't really happen that much, but it could. In which case, you would just remove the checkbox from Luke. So sad for Luke. He was a manager for like a minute, but now Luke should not be able to see biz dev anymore. So that's the way that I recommend doing it. You don't really want to be manually or like hard coding emails or anything like that. You want to use custom user attributes. Okay, we're ready for the grand finale. But before I go there, any questions about this? That's a great point, Sal. Yes, I'm showing the specific things. I am showing specific things here just to show how you set them up. But Sal brings up a great point. He says Luke has access to the people table. You definitely want to restrict the people table if you don't want people going into the people table and promoting themselves. And that would be simple enough, right? You would just add a table rule, people, everybody else, make it read only. Doesn't matter who they are. If they're not the owner, if they're not Casey, they can't do it. So Luke can go and see that he is not a manager and cry about it, but he cannot change it. That's a great point, Sal. Okay, so the grand finale, we're going to go back to payroll. We're going to do the same thing. We're going to create user attributes to, and we're going to use reference columns with it. Some of you already know reference columns because I recognize some of you. So this might be easy for you. And if not, you're going to learn a little bit of Grist magic. So we already have a table of people that has email. We're set up to create a new user attribute. And what we want to do is make it so that when Lily comes here, Lily should only see rows assigned to Lily, where Lily is in the person column. So if I were filtering, she should only be seeing this, basically. Okay, I'm going to revert my filters. But I don't want to do that with just filters. I want to do that with access rules and truly lock this down. So first thing we're going to do is we're going to add user attributes. I'm going to call this one person because we're going on an individual level. I'm looking up email. Where am I storing emails? In the people table, and it is in the people column in an email, in the email column. Okay, so I'm going to save that. I'm going to add a rule for payroll. I'm going to write the rule, and then I'm going to explain why the rule is written this way. So what I'm saying is, in payroll, owner can do whatever they want. And for everyone else, whoops, I copied this whole thing from a document. Okay, what I'm saying is, if the person equals, I think it should be called person. I changed the name here, person.id. So that's the new custom access rule that I wrote, .id. Then they have read-only access. They can read it, they can't update it, delete it, they can't do anything with it, they just read it. So why is this the rule? What does this .id mean? Let me just save this, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to open a few views of this in a new tab. So in order to understand what's happening, we need to understand what a reference column is. So a reference column, even though I am seeing here Lily's name, what you're seeing is not what is stored in this cell. So by contrast, in this column, 40 is the numeric value that is being stored here. But here in a reference column, what we're actually storing is the ID of the record in the table that it's pointing to. So here we're pointing to the people table, and we're choosing to see full name, but the real value is the row ID. So Lily is number 7. So if I go over to, or was that Lucy? The things move around on me. Someone is number 7. Let me see the full name. Okay, so the point is we have the row ID, and then when we come here, there's like a sneaky extra column. If you make a column to the left, and you can expose the ID of something by writing $ID. So yeah, Lucy was 7. Like, I'm pretty sure things are just moving, but so this is the actual ID. This ID right now is matching the row counter, but it doesn't have to. So if I sort this by like the name in alphabetical order, you can see that the ID stays with the person. So in Payroll, we're actually linking things based on who the person is in this other table. So the match is happening. Here's what is the record ID in the people table? This is the record ID in the people table. So if we go back to access rules, what we're saying is the value in the reference column, that ID needs to match the row that you did the lookup in. So Randy logs in, and based on the user attribute, we know he's ID 4. So he should only be seeing things with ID 4 in the person column. That's how that works. That's how you use reference columns with user attributes. That can be a bit tricky, but that's what you're doing, is you're figuring out what the ID is and then what the ID is assigned at this level. So then let me just go back to showing the full name because that's prettier. I go to access rules, just want to make sure person ID, read only. So if I view this now as Ivan, oh, I must have made a typo somewhere. I knew I was going to make a typo. I felt it. Okay, so because I was copying from a document. Oh, I didn't save. Okay, so it's person, email, people, email, person. Let's just go record person. Typos are where I always catch myself with this. So with record, it goes person, needs to equal user dot person dot ID. And that should work. Nope, that was there. I'm trying to figure out where I made the typo. My payroll. Let's see. I'm just going to add. Let me see, Lily, unless he's an owner. Okay, give me 1 second to figure out where I made a mistake. Sorry, I did this just before, but I'm just going to recreate this to figure out. Ivan 1. I'm checking the column ID. So let me show you what I'm doing. How do you troubleshoot this since I'm troubleshooting it? I think it should not be read only. Oh, no, you're right. No, Paul, you made me realize what it is. I didn't do everyone else. Everyone else needs to be denied. So the order of rules again, I just forgot to do this because I'm moving very quickly on a webinar. You need to then deny when that condition is no longer met. So if I'm saying here, Ivan can see it when it matches, but then I don't deny for when it doesn't match, Ivan's an editor, so he can still see everything until I deny it. That's the problem. That's what it is. I just forgot to deny when the condition is no longer met, because if I don't do that, it's going to revert to the default rules. That should be it. Yeah. So now we're only seeing Ivan. So that's all it was. I'm just moving too fast. So Eunice should only see Eunice. Lily should only see Lily. So you have to remember to deny, or else it's going to go back to those default rules. And you can see that sometimes I do that on purpose like when we were over in project tasks, there was some rule where I didn't need to specify because I wanted it to go to default rules. I wanted to say, okay, when this rule isn't met, just go to default rules. But in this case, when rules aren't met, we're denying. Yeah. And I have it in my notes. If I just read the next bullet point, I would have remembered. So that's all it is. But that's why view as is so nice. I haven't added any of these people to the document. I can view as them. I can test it. And once you actually add someone, they go above and they have a little colorful icon with their initials. So you know the difference. If it has this gray, it's like a dummy. So you don't need to worry about it. So that's all it is. You just need to deny. Okay. So this part can be a little confusing if you're not used to the way that reference columns work. But once you get your head around how reference columns work, you've unlocked most of the magic in Grist. And Paul, the reason why I made this one read only is because I do want them to read it only when this condition is met. Otherwise, they should not be able to read it. But then I don't want them to update, add anything new to that table or delete anything from that table, even if it's their own record that they can see. Yep. Yep, go ahead, Fabio. We're up to questions. That was the end. That was the grand finale. Yeah, go ahead. Okay, let's see. There's a boom. So you want to make it to a specific book selected. If you click on any cell and you right click, you can copy the anchor link. So it'll open with that cell selected. So if you have like a selector, so if you had like something like, oh no, let me go to tasks, like this selector, you could have this one already selected and then copy that anchor link. Is that what you mean? If you're trying to completely restrict it so that they're only seeing this and nothing else, you can do that with link keys as well. So if you go to our support center, under more examples, there is a link keys guide that teaches you how to do that. You can use access rules to, but it sounds like that's not what you need. You just need the anchor link. One thing to note about this though, is if you're using the anchor link and somebody has a filter on their end. So filters, when you're filtering, you can have filters that are saved for everyone. So for example, in this one, I actually have this filtered by backlog for everyone that's saved. But I could also have like transient filters that I haven't saved for everyone yet. And if you do that, if somebody has that setting and you send them an anchor link that's out of view, it'll just sort of like not show them the right thing. And it's kind of hard to tell what's going on because they have that record out of view. That might not be a problem based on what you're describing, but it's just something to keep in mind. Filters could affect whether or not an anchor link works. Okay. You should be able to create it. I know I've done it. We're like basically, we've done this on the forum. Yeah. So Sal's asking, is it possible to prevent users from being able to make a cell empty for a date? You could protect. Do you want them to be able to sometimes edit the date, but not other times, or just never edit the date? If you want them to never edit the date, you could make a column rule that just makes it read only. Then they can't update it. Happy to hear that, Fabio. So you're saying they should be able to edit it, but not clear it? Yeah, I think, let's see, I've never tried this. Let's do it live. Let's see. I've never tried this, but I think there is something. So I'm going to do this in the tasks table in the outcome column. So what I want to do, I want to see if I can do it this way. No, I'm not going to do it with the column. I'm going to do it down here. I'm going to say something called new rec. So a new rec means is after the save, after they try to change it, if the new record has a particular value, then deny it. Let's see if I can do this. So if I say, did I type that correctly? Yeah. So if I'm going to say outcome, if it equals blank, basically. So what I'm saying is if the string is blank, I don't know how well this would work in a date column versus a text column, but new rec is something that looks at what the record is going to become, not what it currently is. So if I did this, and then I said you can't update it, create or delete. So you can't create that record, but you should still be able to read it. I'm just testing this because I've never done that. Like you can edit except when it goes blank. Then let's find out. No columns. Oh yeah, I don't want this anymore. Okay. I don't want column rules. Let's see. If not, we can take this to the forum because I'm not sure if this is going to work. I've never tried. Let's find out. So I'm saying, oh, that's for editors. I need to try to do this as an editor because I'm the owner right now. Okay. So if I try to save this as, well, I want a new record that's going blank. Let me actually put something in it and then try to erase it. That would make more sense. Okay, I probably could have done that as the editor. So if I try to erase this, if this doesn't work, we'll figure out in the forum, or maybe it's a new feature request. I don't know. Yeah, I couldn't do it. I couldn't delete it, but can I edit it? Yeah, it worked. There you go. I did it live. So that's how you do it. New rec. Whee. So this is how I did it, Sal. New rec, the column. So I'm basically allowing an update in general if when this condition is not being met. Thanks, Paul. Okay. Yeah. One of the cool things about working on Grist is, I don't know, sometimes people say, is this possible? I'm like, maybe. And then I just have to try it and find out. Okay. Any other questions? Yeah, that's been a request. That's a filter improvement we want to do with or. You're talking about like with like choice lists and stuff like that, or yeah, that's an improvement we want to make. For now, you would just have a formula column that kind of does it, or there's like some workarounds, but yeah, it would be nice to do that. Are you encountering this with choice list columns? Is that your use case? Where you want to say this value or this value, not and? You can also make it a request in the forum. And if anyone else has questions, feel free to chime in. There are some changes with filters that went out maybe 8 weeks ago. Well, we've made two big changes to filters, actually. So one is on date filtering. We now have a calendar, so you can select a range. I don't have a lot of dates here, so we're not going to see a lot, but there's like a range of things from beginning to end. And you can see that this is appearing here. You can make things relative. So one of the requests that we had was, people were doing this with formulas and it was a bit tedious, which is basically, I want this dashboard to show me tasks in the next week or in the next 14 days. And it updates every single day relative to what today is. So there's a way to do absolute dates or relative dates, and you can put the relative dates on either end of the bound. So I can say, give it to me between 16 days ago and the 12th of this month, or, whatever it is. Like if I click another day, it changes what my options are relative. So like you click it and then you can change what it is relatively. And then there's also just quick shortcuts, like give me today, last 7 days, last 30 days. So then this is going to keep updating. So tomorrow, the definition of 30 days ago or yesterday changes. So this is new. I really love this. I'm already using it a lot. The other changes we made only change one thing in terms of functionality. So actually, I was just doing it over here. If we look at what filters I have, you see how one of these has a pin and one doesn't. We had the toggle filter bar that was all or nothing. Either you're showing the buttons for all of your filters, or you're only showing the buttons for some of your filters. And sometimes you don't want that. So for example, here, we're in the backlog view. It should only ever be showing backlog. I don't want people showing anything else, but maybe I do want to filter by project if there was a lot of these things. So I could toggle the button for person on or off if I wanted to, or project. And you can see the filter still applies. The filter is still there. It's just whether or not I have the convenient button. And the reason that you want to create these buttons when you're thinking about building this for a team, it's if the button is there, then what they can do is do a transient search. I don't have a lot of data here because it's just dummy stuff, but they can do a transient search, but they can't save it for everyone else. So it's like you're guiding them in what this is for. These buttons are here. This is how you drill into this table, but there might still be a hidden filter. Like in this case, we're only looking at backlog. So the main change in functionality for filters overall is being able to selectively choose which columns are pinned. And then we just did some other smaller things just to make the UI more consistent so that what you see here in the creator panel is the same as what you see from the widget menu. And something else we've had for a long time, but a lot of people miss, it's I want one that has like more. It's if you're in a cell and you right click, you can just do filter by this value. I use it all the time. It's very nice. It's really nice for like basic data cleanup. Like if there's like an X that you need to turn into true, because like you were importing from somewhere else and it was X's and blanks instead of true or false, filter for all X's, make them true, filter for all blanks, make them false, that kind of thing. We don't yet have data validation. That's what you're asking for. For some of these, there's ways to do it with formulas, basically, but as like a native feature, that's on the road, well, sort of on the roadmap. Probably not in the next few months, but it's on our minds. The question is, can you limit to make it a valid URL or a valid email? That's data validation. For emails, it's usually an email column type. What are we working on right now? You're welcome. Yeah, thanks. What are we working on right now? God, that's a question. Actually, let me stop screen sharing and then I'll just look. I can tell you what we're working on. So we're working on we're working on a lot of onboarding and usability things. So right now, if you come to these webinars, you learn a lot, but it may not be where you are in your journey. So we're doing in-product tutorials where it preloads data for you and then guides you in how to do things. So it'll have like 2 tables of data and then do this, do that, and then you learn things. So the first one's going to be the Grist basics, but we will then have more complex things like basically this entire webinar, we could just give you this data in a document and then guide you through how to do it and learn things that way. So that's something, just better onboarding things. We're working, webhooks is coming up. A lot of people have asked for, we have like webhook support, but we don't have the UI for it. Working on that, working on the design for that. And I'm trying to think of other big projects. Some improvements to access rules that I mentioned. So being able to group table rules that are the same, so you don't have to keep writing the same rules over and over. You can just kind of put them together, copying and pasting and tweaking table rules, and little things like that, like ergonomic things. Okay, another question. I'm trying to figure out the last. So you're saying that if you're a competent builder, of views and stuff like that, you can hide certain things. That's true to a certain degree. If you haven't locked down the structure, anyone could find things in raw data. Maybe that's something we could make easier to lock down. Currently, that's not possible. Trying to. So just to finish the question, I'm trying to figure out what you mean by the question. What this lets you do is it lets you do things like censor things down to each cell in a way that follows particular logic. That's really not easily done with standard access rule management. So I can show you an example from one of our invoices. So for example, let me show you one of these. I'm going to share my screen in a second. So we have like this sales commission dashboard where I'm censoring particular cells. So I might want this person to see how much the others. So here I'm viewing as Harry. He's one of our sales reps in this fake company. And I want him to see like a leaderboard of sales, but not so much about commission rates, amounts, in case that's been negotiated differently for different people. He can't see the specifics of other people's sales, but he can see his. This kinds of stuff is, it's a little difficult to sort of generalize this to standard access management. Like you want more control over the specific rules to start getting really granular down to each cell. And Sal, if you want, you could put the No Code France person YouTube channel in touch with us, and we could also help them get up to speed. Oh yes, I'm glad Paul mentioned translations are starting to take place. He's one of our volunteer translators, translated into Portuguese, German, and Spanish, which is great. Another team translated to French. Right now, the language set in Grist is based on your default browser settings. But what he means by starting to take place is we have a design and we're implementing just a way to set it from your profile settings as well. So Grist in different languages. And if anyone would want to volunteer how to translate it, we have a way to do that now. So yeah, you could volunteer and work with us, and it's how many strings? Like 600 something. So doable. How did I write censored and access rules? This is actually in our template gallery under the sales and customers workspace. If you look at the access rules, you can look at them here and see how that happened. You can see how we did it. It's a combination of row level rules and column rules. So when you have it where not the entire row is gone, but only certain values, depending on who you are, this is what happens. It happens automatically based on the logic of your rules. So you can look at this template. It's the sales commission dashboard. Oh, you're right, Sal. Look, you guys know what we're working on. I don't know why you asked the question. You know better than we do. Yeah, we are working on AI formula assistance. In fact, I need to go in 5 minutes for a meeting about that. So I have 5 minutes before I got to go talk about AI formula assistance. So I think you guys know our roadmap. Which honestly makes me feel great that you guys know our roadmap. We try to be transparent and responsive. So also, Paul and Sal should just come to all the webinars and just ask these questions that remind me to say things. Yes, Fabio, what I was mentioning was link keys guide. So what this is, I can take a little bit of time to explain this a little bit more, is you can use a unique identifier and then put that into URL parameters so that then when somebody visits your document following a particular URL parameter, you combine that with the access rules. So then the access rules apply based on that parameter. So this guide teaches you how to do that. Like, how do you, so if they go to just the URL without any parameters, they'll be denied access. And then based on what parameter is in the URL, they see something different. So this is very helpful for like generating specific links for clients. So that's what this is. This is invoices for particular like families that have like tutoring. So each family gets their own unique link with their own parameters. They see something different. Is it planned to have calendar, Kanban, gallery view, or do we have to build it with a widget? Planned, but we're not working on it right this second. It's something we definitely want to do. I'm itching for a calendar all the time, but I'm also itching for a lot of things. So, but yeah, that's something. I think calendar comes up a little bit more than the other two. Gallery is a little bit easier to build on a custom widget. And if someone builds it and it looks nice, we might just add it to our pre-made list as well. The answer for censored in the rule is it's not a particular setting. This is what happens based on the logic of your access rules. So if you want to see how I did this one, you can go to this template, which is the sales commission dashboard. It's in the sales and customers workspace in our template gallery. And what this does, it's basically what's happening here is I didn't hide the entire row. I'm just hiding certain columns. So then whenever that happens, this just happens. It'll just say censored. So it's not like a particular thing you need to do. So then you can just look at these access rules and see how it's applying. I don't know why they let me do this. My memo is just memo. Yeah. Okay. You're welcome. Are there any other questions? And if there are no other questions, thank you for joining and for being super active. It's great when there's a lot of questions and when people already know Grist and help me catch myself. Okay, thanks everyone. See some of you next month.